Please be seated. The court is back in session. Again, the floor is given to the Deputy Co-Prosecutor to continue putting further questions to the witness.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me turn to another subject. I want to talk a little bit with you about the Vietnamese prisoners at S-21 and instructions you received relating to that. Were there prisoners at S-21 who were Vietnamese soldiers? And did you receive instructions from your superior on what to do with prisoners who were Vietnamese soldiers?
Yes, I recall that. It was Wu Ding Ngo, who was a former TFK soldier and who was the first June soldier that was arrested. And later on, he became a soldier of Viet Cong and was arrested by Khmer soldiers on the 6th of January 88, says the witness. There was an upper order from the regarding the questioning of June soldiers, and the purpose was for them to confess that they invaded Cambodia and they wanted to use Cambodia as an umbrella of Indochina. Their voice would be recorded and broadcast, and there requires two segments of 5 minutes each per week. And actually by that time, Brother Kiel went to the front battlefield, and I assigned Mom Nai with Patachan, who used to study in Hanoi, to question the Yun soldiers. These Patachan knew how to speak a Yun language as well as Thai and Lao languages. So Mom Nai actually learned Yun language from this Patachai, and I used him to assist Mom Nai in doing his work. So this is what happened to Yun soldiers.
Who was the superior? Who was it that instructed you to make audio recordings of confessions of the Vietnamese soldiers that could be broadcast on the radio? Who gave you that instruction?
I have just made that point. It was Brother Noon. In fact, Son Sen had not met me face-to-face starting from the 15th of August 1978. I apologize. It was in 1977, that is the time that Cambodia declares that June was our enemy, and that announcement was made on the 31st of December 78. When Wu Ding Ngo arrived, I received an order from Brother Noon regarding the audio recording of the confession. So it was not a Son Sen that I received orders from, it was Brother Noon. Judge Laverne, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sorry to interrupt your examination. I would like a clarification because in French, we heard at a point in time that the first Vietnamese soldier was arrested on the 6th of January 1988, unless I am wrong. So I think that date is wrong. I do not know whether you heard the same erroneous date in English, but this is a matter that should be clarified by the witness. On what date was the first Vietnamese soldier admitted to S21?
Thank you, Judge. It was 6 January 1978.
Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Witness. Was it the year were Vietnamese prisoners arrested and sent to Vietnamese soldiers arrested and sent to S21 throughout the year 1978? That is from January through December of that year.
I do not recall the exact number. However, there were many of them.
I want to read to you an excerpt from your testimony in your trial on the 10th of June 2009. This is document E3/525 at 9:33 in the morning to 9:35 in the morning. And this is what you said on this subject. Quote, "The Communist Party of Cambodia used the voices of the Vietnamese people and the Vietnamese language for propaganda purpose. Question, did you therefore direct that these Vietnamese soldiers be interrogated so that you could get material for radio broadcasts?" Answer, the objective is determined from the upper echelon, and I ordered the interrogators to do what it took in order to achieve the objective of the upper echelon. That is, Vietnam invaded Cambodia in order to put Cambodia into the Indo-Chinese Federation. The essence of the confessions of those Vietnamese were sent to Uncle Nguyen. Therefore, whatever it is, he would adjust, and then he would send it to me, and I would make some changes. So the purpose of the propaganda was determined from the upper echelon, and I just tried to fulfill those objectives. End of quote. What I wanted some clarification on, you indicated in your testimony that the confessions of these Vietnamese prisoners were sent to Uncle Nguyen, to Nguyen Chea, for him to review, and that he provided some changes to the confessions. Do you remember that, and do you remember the nature of the changes or comments Nguyen Chea would make about the Vietnamese confessions?
First, allow me to bring up a matter. The excerpts that you read seems to focus more on the Yuen people than the Yuen soldiers. Only a few Yuen people were arrested, and the rest were all Yuen soldiers. And at that time, many Yuen soldiers were arrested and brought to the center. what was the purpose of interrogating the UN soldiers? For example, on the plans to invade us, on who issued those invasion orders. In fact, it would be a waste of time to interrogate them on this matter. And I'm satisfied with the orders from the upper echelon, that is, to do what it needed for them to confess that they were sent by their superiors to invade Cambodia and to include Cambodia into the Indo-Chinese Federation. And I believe in that plan because that was the hidden agenda of Vietnam. Through history, you could see that. And I sent the audio recording as well as the audio record, as well our voice interpreting the audio recording, and only minor changes were made. For example, a number of firearms. For example, for 15 firearms, he would change it to 20 firearms. So he only made minor changes. And that is a bit contradictory to my stance, since usually I would stick to the fact. And I did not want to see discrepancies in the June language and the Khmer language. Oh, I apologize. In fact, we only wrote the Khmer script, and it would be read out by radio broadcaster, and it was not audio recorded in Khmer.
When you said he made minor changes, who were you referring to?
I refer to Uncle Noon, as I stated earlier, because by that time, Brother Son Sen had gone for quite a long time to the front battlefield.
And so just that I understand correctly, you sent the Vietnamese confessions to Nuon Chea. He would make minor changes, such as increasing the number of firearms to be higher. Do I understand correctly?
Yes, he only made minor changes. He made changes to the Khmer text, and then it will be given to the radio broadcaster to announce it.
Did Nuon Chea also give you orders relating to photographing and taking some films of the Vietnamese soldiers who were prisoners at S-21?
Yes, there was an order to take photograph, and the photographs were taken by S-21, and Bong would assist me in selecting which photographs to keep and which not to keep. And in fact, there was a conference in Indonesia, and there we should select some documents in order to some photographs in order to show them that indeed June invaded Cambodia based on those photographs. And in fact, they did not take a video of the UN soldiers. They actually made movies of the UN soldiers by Tang, who was a cameraman. And I actually asked Ho to take Tang to prepare a stage so that movie could be made of the UN soldiers. And the location was to the east of Street 163 and to the north of Mao Zedong Boulevard. And as I stated earlier, there was a pond there. And that was the setting stage for movie making. And actually, those UN prisoners wore their military uniforms when they were arrested in. Also at S21, a stage was prepared for the movie that the UN soldiers saluted and then showed their name and rank. And the movie was made at my workplace, that is at Street 95, and that house was facing the west. So the movie was made there as well.
And you said that the cameraman who came to make this movie was named Teng. Can you explain to the court who Teng was?
Allow me to repeat it. Teng was a nephew of Pol Pot. He studied how to make movie and cinematography in China.
When you received the instructions from Nuon Chea about photographs of the Vietnamese soldiers, did he explain what type of people he wanted photographs? Did he give you any further explanations of the people that he wanted shown in these photos?
That was the general instruction. However, it was up to Teng to make the arrangement of the movies. Even when the movie was shot at my house at Street 95, as usually UN soldiers used to hold their cap in the left hand, but Teng gave instructions not for them to hold the cap in the left hand. And Teng was the one who also selected where to shoot movies near the pond.
Let me. I want to talk about not about the movies first, but about the photographs that Pong helped you pick. Let me read to you a statement, a written statement from you in the investigation in Case 1. This is document E3/5756. E3/5756. This is what you stated. Quote, I wish to clarify that for all the Vietnamese, both military and civilian, I had been ordered, 1, to interrogate them. These responses were taken for broadcast on the radio, and continues on. And then number 2 of what you had been ordered, you said the following. Number 2, to select 4 to 10 UN soldiers to be taken and photographed. Select those with very UN featured faces. Enlarged to 18 by 24 dimensions, S21 made the photographs. Pong helped select the photographs and sent them to upper echelon. End of quote. Who is it that gave you the instruction to select people who had very UN featured faces?
Witness, please hold on, and Counsel Antakishe, you have the floor.
Je suis désolé d'interrompre.
I'm sorry to have to interrupt the co-prosecutor. I just wish to have the reference.
It's a short one page or 2 page document. And the document number is E3/5756. Mr. Witness, who who gave you the instruction to select soldiers with very Yun-featured faces for the photographs?
It was Spong who conveyed the orders, and I cannot recall whether the order was given by Brother Noon, but it was Spong who actually conveyed the message. And allow me to add that there was one person whose face looked very much like June, but the name is Thach Tep. So then we discarded that photo because of the name. The name did not sound like a June name, but sounds like a Cambodia Crown's name.
What happened, Mr. Witness, what happened to the Vietnamese soldiers after their confessions had been obtained and they had been photographed, these movies had been made? What happened to them after that?
In principle, both civilians and soldiers had to be smashed.
I want to ask you about another reference in the interrogator's notebooks. So if you could take the yellow binder that's in front of you. And if you can find the place where I've marked with the letter B, Your Honors, this is in the Pon Tui S21 interrogator's notebook. It is document E3834, Khmer ERN 000774776, English 0018448. And on this page, if you need some help to find the page, let us know. It has a yellow post-it on it with the letter B, and the Khmer ERN is 000774776 in document E3834. This is what I wanted to ask you about. There is a note from the interrogators from the 18th of June, 1978, and if we have this, we can show it on the screen also. The note reads, quote, "The problem of the Yun hidden in Kampuchea, they are hiding everywhere," end of quote. And then a few pages later, for you, I've marked, also put a post-it marked with the letter C at Khmer 0077485, English 001845504. There are the following notes from the 18th of July, 1978. Quote, and if we can show this on the screen. "We have captured," number one, quote, "Why are we looking for the Yun? We have captured some Yun in the northwest. In Tramung district, we have captured Yun. We must set the view clearly that the Yun will do whatever they must to take Kampuchea. So in the middle, there must be Yun there too." And point number two in the notes, "Have we found the Yun or not? Maximum victory equals finding the Yun. Minimum victory equals finding additional traitor connections who are Yun agents." End of quote. My question, Mr. Witness, do you remember providing instructions in 1978 to interrogators on the problem of Yun who had remained and were hidden in Kampuchea and the necessity of finding those people? Do you remember providing those instructions to your interrogators?
Regarding the operation at the time, as well as the excerpt that you read, it is consistent. Of course, June soldiers who were hiding in Cambodia at the time were being searched. And I'd like to add one thing. This is not Comrade Toi's document. Toi did not have any remaining document at S21. I only used to see the true pages and not the rest of this document. And of course, I agree with you in the searching for June soldiers.
Whose notebook is this if it's not Tui? Is it Pond's?
As for Comrade Pon, he wrote a document and it was considered important. And actually, the co-prosecutors kept it to the last proceedings during my trial, and then the prosecutors showed to me the document and asked me to identify it, and I immediately recognized the handwriting, and I said that was Pon's document. And as I said regarding this document, I only recognized the two pages here in this document, and that it belonged to Comrade Toi. As for the rest, I do not recognize them. And I actually already said about the purpose of interrogating June soldiers, and that was our objective.
Are you sure this is a reference to Yun soldiers, Mr. Witness? There is a reference here to having captured Yun in the northwest. Do you remember any Vietnamese soldiers being captured in the northwest part of Democratic Kampuchea?
Regarding the arrest of June in the northwest zone, I cannot recall that, and maybe there was none. What I could say is that they were mainly arrested along the Cambodia-Vietnamese border.
Were you also instructed, in addition to looking for Vietnamese soldiers, to look if there were any Vietnamese nationals or people who had remained behind in Cambodia when most of the people had left back in 1973 or 75? Were you instructed to look for those people also?
I actually wrote quite a long statement on this matter regarding the June presence in Cambodia, and that their presence ended in 1974. Late June requested Pol Pot to have them returns to June in order to engage in the vote. And Pol Pot was happy with that, so all of them were chased away, and in fact, in some instances, they fired shots into the air in order to chase them to return to their country. So the risk of Jun's presence in Cambodia ended in 1974, and from that day onward, I did not see any Jun. And I recall that there was a Jun person who was a mother of my friend. He was Vietnamese, but he joined the party with me, and he actually went to the forest before me. His name was Jo Yang Nghia, and in my name, his name was Ho Nghia. He was a year younger than me. I met his mother briefly at Prey Kadam after 1975. That was the only Yun that I saw after 1974. So I could say that there was no longer any Yun after 1974, and in particular after 17 April 1975. There were Vietnamese soldiers who came to stationed near the border and who wanted to take part of the border. As for the UN civilians, they were no longer present in Cambodia by end of 74.
Well, you said something a little different in one of your OCIJ statements I'd like to ask you about, Mr. Witness. In your OCIJ interview E3/1580, E3/1580, Khmer ERN 00177-580, English 00177-587, French 00177-594 through 595. This is what you said, testified in that statement. Quote, after 17 April 1975, most of the Vietnamese who remained in Cambodia were eliminated. There were very few left. However, I remember seeing S-21 lists carrying the names of Vietnamese who were still living in Cambodia. Civilians and the military were treated in the same way. They were interrogated and sent to execution. End of quote. Does that refresh your memory, Mr. Witness? While most of the Vietnamese had left the country, was it not the case that there were some who had stayed behind? And if so, is it correct that those who stayed behind were executed?
I cannot recall it. Such incident did not happen. Frankly speaking, I do not recall it.
We may come back, if I have time, and look at some specific Vietnamese prisoners who at S-21. I want to turn now to some questions about your function in reviewing the confessions from your interrogators. Specifically, when you received confessions that had been drafted by your interrogators, before you sent them on to your superior, did you review the accuracy of information, the accuracy of the names of people that were identified in the confessions? And what I want to know is, was one of your functions to try to make sure that the people that were named in these confessions were real people, and that with the actual positions stated in the document.
Thank you. If we talk about people's names who were implicated by prisoners, interrogator would examine all those people's names by themselves. The superiors did not know that the people's names are owned by the interrogation units. I would review the content of the confession and highlighted the confessions which were of Sun Sen significant interest. Kong Kian, I highlighted clearly the content in Kong Kian confession. This person used to go to Sector 25 with me. I made short annotations on his confession. And confession of Mia Tuja was much highlighted by me. Tuja was once working at the Laotian embassy, and most of the confession were highlighted very minimal by me. And there was one confession with a Q annotation, as I recall. And that confession was Long Lian's. Long Ni, alias Juan. I sent a letter to my superior, and Pol Pot sent the annotation to Sun Sen about Long Ni, alias Juan. In summary, I did not make annotation whether certain prisoners truly spoke or confessed. I only made a short annotation. And to make it short, the interrogators would be responsible for the content of the confession, and I would only make annotations on some confession which were interested by my superiors.
My question to you is, what did you do if you received, when you received a confession from one of your interrogators and it named a person as, let's say, the head of the West Zone who was not actually the head of the West Zone? What did you do? Did you ask the interrogator to make corrections, or did you just send that document on to your superiors?
Thank you. This issue was widely known at S21. For example, there was a case of one prisoner who implicated Brother Phum, the Secretary of the East. I was first asked whether Koi Thun should be further interrogated, so I had to seek the permission of my superior. Usually, confession of Phums were annotated by me with the alphabet S or SAW in a circle or in a box. And in the case of Yuan, he made the annotation that if the enemy implicated so many people, the brother at the West should be asked about that issue, and brother of the West was Ho. So it depended on the permission given to all of us, whether or not a prisoner should be further interrogated. President, thank you. It is now time for break, said the President. My apology, I confused with the time. You may continue your questioning.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me turn to a new subject with the last 20 minutes we have here today. I want to ask you a few questions about Mr. Khieu Samphan. And I want to make clear, I want you to provide this answer based on the knowledge you had during the time of the Democratic Kampuchea regime when you were the chairman of S21. What positions did Khieu Samphan have in the party and the regime between April 1975 and January 1979?
The public announcement over the radio was that Khieu Samphan was the state presidium of the Democratic Kampuchea, or DK. But in reality, he was the chief of a committee surrounding the center.
I want to read to you, and this is a statement you gave in May 1999, before the time you were being prosecuted by this court and had access to any case file. And in May 1999, this is in document E3/347, E3347, Khmer ERN 00160-890, English 00184-998, French ERN 00160-922. This is what you told the interviewer back then in 1999. Quote, Khieu Samphan, he was a full rights member of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Kampuchea. In an administrative role, he was both head of state and chairman of the Central Committee office. End of quote. So, as of 1999, you knew, as you just testified now, that Khieu Samphan was the chairman of the Central Committee office. How did you know that? How did you know that Khieu Samphan had that position?
That is the interpretation or translation of CPK's policy, and the translation is not 100% accurate. The secretary of the party was Pol Pot. Within the party, Pol Pot was known as the head or chairman of committees, various committees surrounding the center. This is what I said in the previous proceedings. That was known by the public in general.
ឯចំណែក
Regarding some issue, I told the court about various issues that are true, but sometimes I did not recall those facts at the time. In 1970s, Jujet alias was arrested and sent to S21. At the time, I doubted that Tamok got revenge against C, or I started to ask Pong about that issue. Some people felt very difficult working at S21. In meetings, some of them were sitting quiet. During the arrest of Brother C, Paul asked him to attend the meeting, and I do not really understand why C was arrested. Number two, during the investigation stage, at the time, the National Co-Prosecutor Yet Jariya questioned me as follows. Kyusampon was not the member of the standing committee of the center. Why Kyusampon was present in the 15 meetings of the standing committees? I responded that I do not know. And another issue about Sun Sen. Sun Sen went to battlefield, and the laissez-passer was issued by Brother Haim, and he used the name Kang at the time. I gave answers on different occasions about the laissez-passer, and the laissez-passer remains today. And whenever I went out, I asked T to give the letter to me. And after my further consideration, I realized that Haim was a member of an office of the party center. And later on, during the investigation stage, in every country, in the communist regime, there was a political bureau of the party center. At the time, Marcel Lemong and Jia Yubenleng was silent and did not ask me further. And perhaps at the time, the list of the document concerning political bureau existed, but I was not shown with that document. During the investigation stages, questions were put to me, but I was not able to respond at the time. But later on, I could think of all the issues based on the documents that I have seen.
Thank you. I understand that some of these organizations or committees, different people use different terms for them. So I want for us to be absolutely clear about what we were talking about here. You started your testimony about Kyusampon by indicating that he was the chief of a committee of the center of some nature. I read you a interview from 1999 where, and this is an English translation, the way it was translated in English here was chairman of the Central Committee Office. You just referred to political bureau of the center. What is the terminology? What was the exact terminology of the office or committee that Khieu Samphan was the chairman of?
Maybe for reasons of transparency with regard to the witness who often or several times has questioned this interview with Nate Thayer, we should maybe explain the circumstances of this interview, because if we got to remind him of what he said in this interview, we should understand it's not really an objection, but it's just like to remind how important it is to remind the witness that this is indeed the interview with Nate Thayer.
That's actually incorrect. This is not an interview by Nate Thayer. I believe it was done by the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner at the time. So that's simply incorrect. In any event, the witness has said the same thing since 1999. Please tell me what was the entity? What is the exact name that you would like to use of the entity that Khieu Samphan was chairman of? That Suvazi alias Dune used to be chairman of.
I would like to tell the court frankly that Suvazi alias Dune was not the trusted party member. Suvazi alias Dune was separated from Coi Thuon at the time. Suvazi alias Dune was the head of Central Committee of the Center in charge of technical aspects. That he was the chairman of an office within the center. Later on, after the investigation, Suvazi alias Dune was arrested. The arrest happened after Coi Thuon's arrest. Yesterday, I made mention about the date of Coi Thuon's arrest, but the date was confused. Coi Thuon was arrested on 25th January 1977, not 76. And on the 1st of February, people from the West, many of them had been sent in. So again, after confession of Coi Thuon, Suvazi alias Dune was also arrested. The position that he had was for a temporary period. And Khieu Samphan was the chairman of various committees surrounding the center, said the witness, as shown in various evidence. He was in charge of Ministry of Commerce, External Commerce. He was in charge of ministries, warehouses. And to my recollection, but this is unofficial, he in charge of the logistic, delivering the water pumper and also other products from abroad to other offices. Survasi alias Duan had the nominal position only, but the power was within powers. So the two individuals held different positions.
And did you know about the positions held by these two men, Suvazi alias Duan and Kusampan? Did you know about this position that you talk about relating to the center office during the time you were chairman of S21? Did you know about that then?
Frankly speaking, at the time, later on I did not see Survasi alias Duan. When I was with Koi Thuan, I met Duan on October 1967 when Duan was called by Koi Thuan to work with him. Later on, when I was transferred to Phnom Penh, I never met Duan, and I knew that Duan was in charge of communications. He kept all the communication, and also he was in charge of some logistics. When the Pol Pot held a meeting, Survasi may have been invited to the meeting as well to submit the reports.
I want to again know that it's difficult 30, 40 years later. How did you know during the regime that Duan Suvazi alias Duan had this position where he was responsible for logistics and communications? Did you hear about that from other cadres? Did you have any dealings with him? How did you learn that he had that position?
Let me clarify the point. Number one, the Ministry of State Commerce was a big ministry. That ministry was in charge of Sun Sen's in-law. Bong Red and I had friendly relationships, and I used to go into the ministry. That is why I learned about that. The reports of Red sent to Pol Pot was seen by me, and that letter was also shown to Pang. That one side of the document had writings on it, so he used that recycled paper to note some information. So again, Rutte used that recycled paper to be the report and sent to Praderheim. As for State's warehouse, on 6 January at around 10, Lin called me to work with a brother, and at the time I thought it was Brother Nguyen, but in fact he was Haim. There was an empty chair, and Comrade Lin pushed me on my shoulder so that I went to take a seat on that empty chair. And Haim said that, comrades, please do not feel scared about the entries of Vietnamese. San and Ruan were responsible for the invasion of the Vietnamese. You all, comrades, should be concentrating on your work. At the time, Ruan pushed the chairs to me so that I could take the seat. So Ruan was working with Brother Haim at the state warehouse. During the proceedings that I attended in the previous occasions, I was asked, how could I assume that Ruan was working with Haim when I just saw him there? I said, that is true what I saw.
We'll come back, and I want to ask you about this meeting you had with Khieu Samphan tomorrow. Before we break, you mentioned Pong, and so I want to ask you about what was Pong's position in the center office, and can you explain the difference between the position that Pong had and the position that Khieu Samphan and Suvazi alias Duin had?
Initially, I thought Pong was the chairman of an office of the center. Brother Nguyen said that Pong could replace me on some tasks when I was assigned to do. So Pong could do some of the tasks that I did, and I was instructed to make reports on what I did to Pong as well. So Pong was the chairman of the office of the center. However, later on, I saw a contemporaneous document, and I found that Pong was the chairman of S71. Pong was the assistant to the center committee. He was the first person, and he was higher than Jane On. That information I learned a long time ago.
One last question before we break. Did Pong ever talk to you about Khieu Samphan, and do you remember, if so, what Pong said about Khieu Samphan?
What I can recall is that Pong told me about the arrest of Brother C. Khieu Samphan was called by Pol Pot to attend a meeting, and One Way was not invited to that meeting. Pong had a conversation with me on different occasions. He went to the workshop of the artist or sculpture, and he talked to me of different various issues. And Pong usually talk bad things about Brother Khieu. As far as you recall, there was an individual named Tol. Perhaps I made that statement to Thomas, the investigator. There was an individual named Tol, the pilot of Lon Nol regime. His original name was Khieu Yuswat or Serewat alias Tol. Pichlum Khun was also a pilot and he landed the airplane at Karachi and later on joined the DK. During the training, Tol took off and fled to Thailand. A helicopter was used to chase the airplane of Tol. At the time, I was told that everyone praised Tol, but not Tol fled. So, concerning the conversation between I and Tol, usually Tol discuss various issues. And concerning the conversation between Brother Haim and I, there was one conversation that I could recall until now. President, thank you. It is now time for the adjournment. The hearing will resume tomorrow on Tuesday, 14 June 2016 at 9 a.m. And tomorrow the chamber will continue hearing the testimony of Duik. Thank you, Mr. Winner. The hearing of your testimony as a winner has not come to an end yet. You are therefore invited to come here again tomorrow at 9 a.m. Security personnel, please bring the accused and also the witness to the cells of the ECCC and invite and bring the accused back into the courtroom before 9 a.m. for the witness.